Well, Cedric, thank you for joining us on Serves You Right.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me, Andrew.
Of course. So I was excited to talk to you. You have a background in hospitality, even though you're doing something a little different these days. Could you kind of tell us about where you came from and how you got into what you're doing now?
Yeah, I was born in south of France, in a tiny little village, and when high school hit, my first year of high school was a bit of a disaster. I wasn't happy. Couldn't make any friends, and
You were a high schooler, essentially.
I was.
Yeah.
That's right. I was a high school. I was a teenager in a high school. I had no different from anybody else, but I created this block with studies. Like I didn't want to go to school anymore, and cooking in my family was always a big thing. My grandmother, my mother, and I always enjoyed being in the kitchen with them. So I decided to give it a try to culinary school. And in France, you can pivot at like 14, 15 and do what we call an apprenticeship, which is you follow studies and you work in whatever field you're in. So that's what I did. I moved to the classic, I would say, educational path to go into apprenticeship. And I fell in love with it. First, I learned to cook and then to be in restaurants, wine, and I did what you call a BTS in French, which is like 2 years of study, then a Bac Pro, a baccalaureate, which is 4 years, and then I did a hospitality business school, which you call that a BTS in France. And after that, I went to work.
Yeah, kind of like our associate's diploma, then like MBA or something, like our sort of track.
That's right. Okay, the track
cool.
is and the last internship that we did with culinary school with the hospitality business school was in Vermont, actually, because our school in France had a twin, so to speak, in Montpellier and Burlington, Vermont, the New England Culinary Institute. And I did my last training there, and I did a pretty good job. And so the executive chef kind of like took me under his wing and said, hey, there's a new Ritz-Carlton opening down in Half Moon Bay, California. If you're interested, put together a resume and I put the good word for you. And I always dreamed to come to the US and live in the US since I was a child. So that was, yeah, you bet you. So I put the resume together and it took about a year for the Ritz to open and all that. So in the meantime, I opened my restaurant, a restaurant, not my restaurant, but I was a chef in a small restaurant in Carcassonne, which was like the main town next to where I grew up. And when the paperwork were done, I came to the US, not speaking much of English at all, and I started in the kitchen, working for the Ritz for a year and a half. And then they sent me to, after a year, things were not doing well with the chef in the kitchen, so I decided to go back to France, and the executive chef who brought me in said, what are you going to go back to France for? You know, there's nothing happening there. What do you want? And I said, well, I'd like to go in the restaurant. And he said, okay. So they moved me to the restaurant, and I was like a busboy at first, and then server and assistant manager. They sent me to Portugal for a couple of years to do the opening of the Ritz by Lisbon. And then I went up, came back to the US, was a bar manager, banquet director, and at the end I was director of restaurants. And I quit in 2009 to study what I'm doing now. So I did, it was a big piece of my life. It definitely was impactful, and I'm so grateful for this part of my life. That's for sure.
The whole journey, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty incredible because there are people who devote their entire life to just one track, and to do one thing really well does take a lot of time. So it's like, did you just have a hunger for learning, or like a hunger for pain? Like, what got you to do all these different lifetime tracks? Just jam them into one life.
You mean to move from hospitality to what I do now?
Just the whole thing. I mean, there are people who spend their whole life just being a chef, or a whole life perfecting the front of house, whole life working on just drinks. Like, it's just like a lot of work, it sounds like.
I think the beauty of working in hotels, and I don't know if you work in hotels or restaurants, but the beauty of working...
I have in the past, yeah.
It's like you have everything there, and it was, I think I came into the business, at least in the US, when it was still... When you work at the Ritz, early 2000, it was such a party, right? People were coming. Doesn't matter if people had a lot of money, but you were creating an experience for them. It was a thing. And each department has a special thing, like working in banquet and putting together, hundreds of thousands of dollars worth weddings, for example. You know, it's you manage this whole team, and everything has to be perfect. You know, dropping of the plate, and it has to be elegant, and it's exciting. Then the bar, you know, people come at the bar, and it's such an amazing place. You know, the very rich people and the people who worked all their life to have this one weekend at the Ritz. It's each department have their own almost soul. And I became in love with that. It's for me, it was really was a love story to work in hospitality business, in hotels and in each department. And why did I change? Because I don't know. I couldn't have done cooking for the whole time. And after a while,
yeah, your body can't. I'm always impressed by the people who spend their whole lives as a chef, because that's a lot on your.
It's a lot, and for me, going there every day, and the pressure and the stress, and being in a place where there's no window, you know, there's no window. You're all that. It takes away a lot of the pleasure, you know. A lot of the pleasure of the cooking is, but you know, buried under the yelling, the hours, the constant pressure, and the no window. You know, it's crazy how many hours you spend in a place where there's no or very little
nodding
light.
my head as I've spent many hours in a kitchen with no window. Yes.
It's draining, isn't it?
Well, yeah. I mean, one of the reasons I did want to ask you about the switch was I, by accident, did a similar thing, but I started in the front of house and actually ended up working back of house management for a while. So about as close as I've gotten to cooking, and you know, it's a different game. Like it took a lot of learning, and it took a lot of very quick skill acquisition that I did not know I didn't have, but needed all of a sudden very quickly. And I've questioned myself on why I accepted that position too in the past, but I was just curious, you know, why I voluntarily went into a windowless room with a lot of heat and a lot of pressure. Thank you all for listening. If you haven't had a chance to check it out, go to servesyouRightPod.com. We have all the old episodes on there, and you can sign up for our newsletter and all sorts of other fun things. Glad you're listening. All right, back to it.
So you're more courageous than me, because I started there and I knew that was not, on the long run, it would have drained my soul.
Yeah, well, you know, after I did it for a while, I decided this isn't going to be long term, and then COVID hit. So I was kind of holding the kitchen job for a while, because we were in a holding pattern, at least for a couple of years. So now that you are not in hospitality, what are you doing these days? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I work with emotions. I went back to France in 2009 and started studying emotions, or the brain construct emotion, and how people can actually, how we can resolve debilitating emotional patterns like anxiety, fear, depression, using the body and not only the intellect, right? Not talk therapy. So I quit in 2009 and went back to France, studied the neuroscience of emotion and somatic therapy specifically, and came back in the US in 2011, started my practice, but I needed to make money on the side, so I managed wine bars for a while until COVID. And when COVID hit, there was no wine bar to manage anymore, so it was good it was a good kickstart for my what I do now. In a way, I had no other choice than to dive completely into what I do now. It was a blessing in many ways.
I mean, if there's one way to describe COVID, a forcing function would be how I describe it. Everyone's life who had like extra, like, oh, you know, I'm holding on to this side job. I've got this part-time job because my parents watch the kids once a week and I can go on Tuesdays. Like, I have something I'm thinking about starting, but I have a hospitality job on the side. Like, everyone who had that story all at once, it's like, okay, we're moving forward. We're simplifying. We're going on. We're doing some new stuff. So, yeah, that's
something
the story
had
I've
to
heard
happen,
before.
yeah.
Yeah,
absolutely. And it was it was a blessing. It was tough, of course, but for me, it was definitely what started my new career.
Yeah, I have a lot of questions. I'm sure you have answers, and you know, I'm a simpleton. So just like forgive me because I'm a simple guy who may not have the most emotional awareness, or like, you know, not the most like in touch with emotions. Like, I'm not the most emotional person, and maybe by that I mean I'm not the most emotive, because I must have emotions.
Yes.
What would you say to someone who, say, feels kind of like me, where it's like, you know, I'm not too anxious, I'm not too worried about many things. Yeah, I get irritated sometimes, but it's just like, it doesn't seem like, it's like the volume isn't a 10. Like, you know, like maybe it's like a 4 or 5.
I'd say good for you. Why looking for
Okay.
problem if you don't have any, right? It's like,
Sure.
it's if there's a thing, if you tell me then genuinely you feel like, well, your life don't have much fear, not much anxiety, it's fantastic. Like not everybody have to be struggling with anxiety, stress, and depression and fear. It's not a thing. I always tell people if there's no problem, don't go and look for problem. Enjoy the way it feels. And if life change one day and it creates fear or anxieties or fear, you will know. And then you will have a chance. You can deny it, you can try to control it, or you can decide to like face it and resolve it. But why looking for problem when there is no problem?
Yeah, it's like when you're studying Buddhism. If you're just starting out, you're like, life is suffering, and you're a brand new like teenager, bright-eyed. It's like, oh, I don't suffer right now. Like, can I find suffering in my life? It's like, it'll find you. Don't worry. Like,
it will find you.
Yes. And I may not have anxiety now, but I guess, something crazy happens. I work at a steakhouse and the cost of steak doubles and we have to close. I'd have a lot of anxiety real fast, someone I love
something
get a
happened
cancer
between two
diagnosis.
Yes, right?
So yes, yeah.
Or there's something, some kind of drama between two employees, and there is like a decision to take that's going to impact the other ones, and it's sometimes things are not black and white, and it can create anxiety. One of the reasons why I came into this business is because managing people, you see that you don't manage people, you manage their emotions. When you have a large team, and I believe you do, there's a lot happening in emotion with people, in the staff, and then the type of tasks you can ask them to do. So it's fascinating.
Yeah, that is an interesting point. It's something I've wondered about, and you might be able to shed some light on this. I've noticed that it has been true in different jobs throughout my life that I'm better at delivering news than a lot of people around me. And I'm wondering, like, is there just like an emotional component of that where maybe my volume's a little lower so people don't react to it? Maybe they get that I'm not like leading with anger, or like, I don't know. Do you see that often?
Yes, it's probably because you hold less tension.
Yeah,
people
okay.
react to tension, right? If I come and I'm about to add a news, and let's say it's not a good news, and my voice is quiet like yours, but I'm full of tension and feel sick in my stomach, people are gonna feel it. And so it's not about your voice. Your voice might be helping, but the delivery, if you deliver it with less tension, it's automatically the vibration, so to speak, is being felt by the audience.
Okay. So, yeah, maybe that'd be a good way to kind of get into this. How do we deal with emotions, the negative emotions, quote unquote, without getting into, like, how do you deal with it in the body? Like, yeah, can you just kind of talk us through that? Because I'm again simpleton. Help me understand this. Yeah,
that's a big part of the job. The big part of my job is to demystify what emotional difficulties are and vulgarize them, so people understand it. So it's not this weird, mysterious thing that you have to deal with. I can tell you how the brain constructs emotional difficulties, so people are aware of it, because most people don't know how that happens. In order for us to have debilitating emotional patterns, which are like angers or anxieties, depression, whatever it is, emotion that keeps on coming back and toxify our life in a way. We know how the brain constructs them. At the origin of any debilitating emotional pattern is always an instant of trauma. Always. Now, what is a trauma? A trauma is an instant, a moment that holds too much stress, physical or emotional, for us to take on when we experience it. So that this traumatic event can happen in utero, at birth, during the first years of life. And it's going to be very, very different. Like right now, I'm 45 years old, and something that I experienced when I was 2 might have been lived as a trauma, and today would be completely irrelevant. So it depends of where we are in our life. It also depends how we're surrounded. I was surrounded by loving parents, and some things could have been lived or experienced as a trauma by somebody else. But for me, because I was surrounded by love and safety, my brain was able to integrate it. So it depends where you're coming from as well. If you're surrounded by, I don't know, alcoholic parents, or there's drugs or noise or homelessness, our relationship to the events will be different.
I mean, you're a kid and you have a teddy bear that loses an eye. Like, the grand scheme of things, it's not that big of a deal. But to the child, it is. And,
it is.
Small things loom large for kids. And do you have a parent that hugs you after that? Or do you have a parent that tells you to shut up, go to bed? Like, that changes things greatly. Yeah.
Exactly. And if your teddy bear is the only constant you have in your life because your parents are never home, this teddy bear losing her hair, it might actually touch you deeply at the time as well, as you just explained, absolutely. So we know at the origin is always an instant of trauma. But to be very specific, what creates the pattern is not the traumatic event. What creates the pattern are the instant of dissociation happening during the traumatic event. When the stress, physical or emotional, is too high, we're going to dissociate. So to give you an example, what you and me right now, we experience consciously is about 2,000 bits of information per second, processed at the speed of about 150 miles per hour. That's conscious. Is you on my screen, what I can capture from the room around me. At the same time, our subconscious, if the prefrontal cortex is not here to filter the information, at the same time, our subconscious can gather 400 billion bits of information per second versus 2,000, 400 billion, and to process it at a speed of 150,000 miles per hour instead of 150. So the prefrontal cortex, when there is no excessive stress, is filtering a lot of the information that we could have access to so that we can have this conversation and live in society. So the first thing that to remember is that. The second thing to remember is our brain we always predict based on past situation, past references. We can see that with food, for example. If you had your first apple when you were, let's say, 3, every time after that, if it's a green apple, when you're going to grab an apple, before biting in, your brain is going to predict exactly what you're about to experience. And you match most of the time with reality. It's a prediction.
They've done a bunch of really cool experiments where they take food that's perfectly fine and they use like dyes or different techniques to make it look like it's either moldy or like I'd heard of one where they like made it was a chocolate but they made it look like it was a piece of dog poop, and like actually checking the brains of the people as they're telling them like this is actually chocolate, and like do you like try a little bit, and just like the reaction that people have even though they know and have been told that this food is normal. It's hard to eat a sandwich with green on it and not be like you have that prediction whether or not you like to or whether or not you want to too.
Absolutely. And the prediction is subconscious. So whatever you tell consciously to your brain doesn't register, right? It's like cognitively, I know that it's not poop, but everything in my body is telling me not to eat this stuff.
Yeah.
So you can overrule it and create a new experience, but it's going to take effort and courage to overrule it in a way. So
exactly.
You see that an emotional difficulty is nothing else but an outdated prediction from the brain. So it's important to have that in mind. The brain constantly predicts. Now, what is happening when we experience a trauma? It doesn't matter how old we are. It doesn't matter what the trauma is. It's always the same pattern in the brain. When we experience an instant that holds too much stress for us to take on, there is an instant of dissociation. During this instant, the prefrontal cortex shuts down, and the subconscious, in a way, takes over. So imagine that during this instant of dissociation, that your brain opened 2 huge vortexes, one outside to capture all the information happening around you in a very high definition at a very high speed. So the brain is going to record everything sensorial, what you see, what you smell, the taste in your mouth, the temperature, etc., the ambience of the room. And your subconscious is also going to record what physical sensation you feel during this instant of dissociation. So you have 2 huge vortexes recording what's going on around you and what's going on inside of you, but in a non-logical, non-linear way. And when you come back, so to speak, into consciousness, the vortex shut down. Now, in my work, we never talk about the trauma because a trauma usually holds several moments of dissociation. If I'm being sexually abused for 5 minutes, I'm not going to dissociate only once. Chances are I'm going to go in and out, in and out, in and out. And every time I go out in dissociation, that's a quote-unquote opportunity to create a pattern later. And so what matters is an instant of dissociation, not the trauma itself. That's important to understand, I think. Well, anyway, this happened to us, and we experienced trauma many times in our life, in utero, at birth, and later on. But what is happening is the same way as your brain is going to predict the taste of the food that you're going to taste. Whatever trauma happened in your life, when you're in life and your brain recognizes one or several elements that were present during a traumatic instant, during an instant of dissociation, when your brain recognizes one or several elements currently in your life that were present during an instant of dissociation, your brain is going to instantly predict what physical sensations you're about to feel.
Danger. Yeah.
That's right. And very specific, right? If If you say I meet you, and I don't know anything about you, but as I meet you, my brain recognizes a smell in you of a kid who used to beat me up when I was 5 or 6.
Or I smile like your dad, or something like that. Yeah, yeah.
Absolutely. And I don't recognize it consciously, right? Consciously, I don't make the bridge because it's not conscious. My brain recognizes that. Automatically and instantly, the brain is going to generate what physical sensations I'm about to feel based on what was felt during a specific dissociative instant. Those physical sensations are going to be created in the body. We call that interoception. Now, we know that we feel an emotion not because it's in our mind. We know that we feel an emotion because we feel physical sensations. An emotion is just a bunch of physical sensations that are conceptualized based on the context, and we make it an emotion. But at the base of every single one of our emotional difficulties, anxiety, fear, stress is always what we call interoception. It's physical sensations. Those physical sensations were the specific sensation that you felt at some point in your life. Your brain is predicting that you're about to feel them. The problem is, when we feel those physical sensations, we control them. We always control them. We breathe, we talk ourselves out of them, we're having booze, we do something, we scream, we do something to control this prediction. And every time you control the prediction, you reinforce the pattern. What we found at the Emotional Health Institute, which is the institute I created in collaboration with Dr. Jacques Fumex in France, is that if we let the prediction play out, the physical prediction play out until the end when we feel an emotion, without trying to control it or without having anybody controlling it for us, if we feel those physical sensations as they change, they will never last longer than 90 seconds. They last between 2 and 90 seconds. This is how long an emotion lasts in the brain. At the end of the prediction, your brain is anticipating to be hit by some kind of danger. Well, at the end of the prediction, if you're in a safe place and you felt the sensation properly, at the end of the prediction, you're safe and sound. From that very instant, that prediction will be updated. That means that whatever stimulus, whatever trigger used to create this emotion in you, used to re-trigger, reactivate this memory in you, now is completely integrated. This trigger, this stimulus will not trigger an emotion in you anymore, ever. So this is what we do at the Emotional Health Institute. We developed this methodology called MRES, for emotional resolution. And we teach therapists, doctors, coaches to use this methodology so that people don't have to control their emotions, but they can resolve them. Does that mean that after working with us, you're not going to feel any emotions? No. You will feel the emotions that are congruent with your current reality. Because a lot of the time, the fears, the anxieties, the depression that we feel are not congruent with what's happening in our life. They're just remaining of things that happened to us previously, but they still overwhelm us today.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. It's, whenever, Jake comes by or wherever, like Luke comes by and asks about my work, how come I get so anxious? There's nothing about it that really is true, but maybe there's that element of the way they ask that's like that teacher in second grade, and like you feel that stress, and like you do resist it and try to control it, and yeah, you're just not letting yourself feel it. Whereas like you're not in danger, you're not, but it does feel like that. And you know what it kind of reminds me of? It's just kind of silly, but let me know if this is off base.
Go for it.
And it's useful, at least in my conception, that we all have this kind of reference point now, but emotions and our reactions and how we disassociate, and like that whole process kind of reminded me of like LLMs. They all get trained on data in the past, and they all you're testing them out. You're about to release it to the public, but they have all these weird hallucinations. So you're having to go through and you're testing the data and thumbs down this isn't quite right. And you almost have to retrain the LLM. And it's useful now that we have kind of that model of past inference due to different inputs that maybe you don't see a one-to-one relation giving you this outcome. We all have I don't know, we're going to end up at the end of 2030 and realize we're all just LLMs. But I do have that kind of reference point now. It's making sense in that sort of way.
Absolutely. Absolutely. The thing is, we from very early on, we teach our kids to control their emotions. You know, we don't teach our kids to feel our emotions. And nowadays, when we talk, even between us, we feeling the emotion is like you feel angry, so you scream. You feel sad, so you cry. But that's not feeling the emotion. It's reacting from a bunch of tensions. We don't teach our kids to, you feel tension, you just stop and you feel. We teach our kids to breathe, to count, to do, I don't know, lion breath. We have a battery of a coping mechanism. You know, working in hospitality, one of my coping mechanisms was booze. You know, you work a 10-hour shift.
It's always there, yeah.
It's always there. It's available.
Yeah.
It's available. It's always available, and he does a great job. He does a great job. And working in bars, you know, the bartenders are the first therapist, right? People sit there and they speak, and people regulate their emotion by speaking to somebody that listens to them, and by having booze and opening up more there on the stool than they ever do at work, or they ever do at home. I mean, so we have all those stuff to do to help us coping, but we never learn to resolve them, which is just to feel this interoceptive prediction.
You know, one of the things that I've heard about therapy that I wish I could remember, I've been trying to remember who said it, but one of the things that is often hardest for therapists to deal with is not the patients or the problems, but it's the patient's attempts to self-medicate. Like it's always the interventions that people kind of latch onto as their default that end up causing the problems to get worse and continue on, like controlling the anger, screaming when you're angry, pretending you're not, drinking, drugs, like all the things we do to not feel the feelings themselves kind of cause you to feel the feelings more. Like it's like it goes on and on and on. Yeah.
And you create a whole bunch of other problems, right? Most of the time I drink, but the drinking started as a medication, as you said. I drink because I cannot deal with whatever is happening in me. And of course, and then, okay, if I become addicted, there's going to happen a whole bunch of stuff about self-image, about guilt and shame, etc., etc. That's the thing about human beings. We build emotion upon emotion very quickly. Even if, as you said earlier, if I meet you for the first time and have a reaction to you that have nothing to do with you, I'm going to make up a story about you. I'm going to say, oh yeah, I know why I feel this way about him. And I'm going to look for the reason to feel this way about you.
He was a little cold, or like, he was just a little bit like loose with his tongue, or like whatever it is. Yeah,
exactly. I'm going to believe it. And then for me to stop believing it is going to take a while, because I'm going to believe my story very much.
For sure. I do wonder, and maybe you have a methodology for this, but the kind of, it seems to me, random nature of the things that trigger our responses and cause us to get into these emotional states, that like how, when working with you or working with someone that you've trained, would you trigger these different emotional events? Like, do you have kind of a set method? Do you just kind of depend on looking for the patient's like trigger points, or something even wildly different that I just don't know about?
No, you pointed it out quite well, actually, because that's the goal of a session, right? In a session, a person comes with a problem, an emotion that they know is triggering them, and for us, we know that whatever they see is like when you have a flu, people have a high fever, so they try to get the fever down. Most of the time, when you have a conscious emotion, it's just almost a symptom. There's a whole bunch of stuff that get this emotion strong enough for you to be conscious about. So the way that we start very often is somebody comes to see us, let's say, for anger. We're going to ask them for a specific moment when they felt this anger within the last few weeks, so that it's anchored into reality. So we're never going to work on the original trauma, even if they know, well, I feel this way because my dad 30 years ago. It's irrelevant. Take me to a moment in your life today when this anger came up. So that's what we're going to use. We're going to use recent memories that encompass the emotion they want to resolve. And we're going to get them to resolve this instant that created this emotion in their life. So the reliving process is a bit specific in a way that we're going to trick the brain to believe that it's happening now again. And so we use memory in a specific way, and the brain has no other choice than to re-trigger interoception. So this prediction is being created again in the body. At this point, our job is very simple in a way, is to bring their attention to the sensations, to not tell them that it's going to be okay or none of this, but to feel the sensations in their body until they're completely gone. So that's one way that we do it. Then we're going to use other tools, such as things that we call impact question. You know, when people tell you stuff, very often you can hear what are the fear behind the words. People tell you things a certain way, but they sugarcoat it, or they find excuses or reason why. But when you listen, you can clearly hear what is actually the fear behind it. So we were going to ask specific questions that people do not ask them usually, you know, and that's going to create the fear behind the reaction. And when the fear is activated, we're going to support them in resolving them. And then we have a whole bunch of other things that the purpose is always the same. How can we get the client to actually sit in their fear without any excuses or even if they're good excuses, but how can they sit in their fear so they can feel it, being swallowed by it, so it can be resolved?
Okay. That is very powerful. I was just thinking about, you know, different times I've heard people, it's always like about jobs or about, you know, little things. And it's like, oh, I could never do that because like you do hear that. And it's always when you're describing the reason why. It's like, you know, a lot of things that are quote unquote true out there don't really need a reason. It's like when you start supplying reasons, that's when it's like, okay, the brain has interpreted this in some way for some reason. Even if it's a positive spin, it's like, what are you really running from here?
That's right. What are you really afraid of?
Yeah.
That's right. No matter what, and I often tell my clients, I'm not interested by if it's true or not, but when somebody tells you that, when you put in that situation, what are you really afraid of? You know?
Are you familiar with Derek Sivers?
Say again?
Are you familiar with Derek Sivers, the author? You'd love his work, but he has a book called Useful, Not True. It's just all the things that are useful or true, but not useful. And he just goes through it, and it is very freeing, and it's very, very illuminating about all the things and beliefs we have about ourselves that may be useful, but aren't necessarily true. And, you know, reminding us of that, like everything in society, everything that pretty much has to do with jobs, dealing with other people, they're all useful conventions that we all believe and we've all bought into, but at the end of the day, it's all not true. It's just social conventions that we're all agreeing to hold on to, and it keeps the world going around for now, but yeah.
It's like hypnosis, right? We've been hypnotized since the beginning. Our parents, education, religion, whatever, the media, because we live in this constant state of hypnosis, which is very useful because when you're in a state of confusion, that's what hypnosis does, right? You create confusion so that people can put suggestion and the suggestion can take on. The confusion is the soil for suggestion. And from very early on, we are in a state of confusion. More now with social media and such than ever. And so suggestion can take on. So as you said, you can decide to believe what you believe, or you can stop and question it. Is my belief congruent with who I am today? Am I living my life based on a belief that was put upon me by my family, education, or a lot of us are living life building belief against our parents? Right?
Yeah.
And that's my life, but it's not me. I just build it against my father or against my mother because of some stuff that happened in the... But is it congruent with my reality, with who I am today?
My super religious parents, I'm going to be an atheist. Or, you know, my dad who worked all the time, I'm not going to work at all. Or the mom who never worked, I'm going to work every day. And like, it's like, well, you can also design your life and choose your life not in relation to them too. Like, what do you want? That's a much scarier question. Yeah.
It is correct. It is scary. And people do not like scary, right? You hear all the time people stay in abusive relationship. Why do we stay in abusive relationship? Because at least it's safe. We know what's going on. Even if we being abused verbally, physically, in a way, we know what to expect. And the brain likes that. In a way, it is crazy to say it, but it's sometimes much scarier to jump out of the relationship and to not know what's going to happen within the jail of our abuse. And we do that with ourselves all the time, right? We have a job that we don't like, but you know what? It pays the bills. And what else am I going to do? We do that. We close ourselves in our fears constantly, and we are as big as the jail of our fears. Just because outside, well, not knowing is scarier than what's happening.
Yeah, we're shaking the bars in this prison without looking left and right and realizing it's just a couple bars and we're completely free. We just got to go left or right and just let me out. That's right.
It's easier to do that and complain about it too, right? It's easier than to step out.
Yeah, and I see this a lot with people that are considering getting out of the industry. And I've heard a lot of people talk about this. And you kind of get held on to by this like either or mentality, and like it's like, what, I'm going to leave the industry, what am I going to be, a banker? It's like, well, maybe that is one option, but it doesn't have to be banker or bartender. Like there are more things, but you start getting into this rigid like it's this or that or that's it. And it's like, well, if you give it a little bit, if you think about it, you could probably come up with a few more options, but
Absolutely. And people think that, you know what, I'm going to leave the industry, I'm going to stop serving or be a bartender. But you don't have to slap the door and say, fuck it all. No, you can start shifting, right? You can keep on working as a bartender, but you have other hours during your day. You have all the days when you don't work. What do you do during this time? Are you trying to build something? And it doesn't mean that you have to be a lousy bartender after you decided to go back to school. Or no, respect the bartending. It pays the bills. You put your heart into it as much as you used to before you decided to. Just be respectful with the shift. You don't have to slap the door. And no, you can adapt, but still care for what you do. How many people do you see? We live in the Bay Area. A lot of people are doing in the industry, waiting for something better to happen to them. And so they show up, and they serve table or they cook or they're behind the bar, but that's not, they're quote unquote better than that. So they don't do it completely genuinely because they just do that, but that's just in the meantime. But that's also BS, I think. Respect what you're doing. It feeds you. Put your heart to it. It doesn't mean that you're only going to be a bartender, but you're going to learn so much being a bartender if you do it well, if you do it heartfully. Working in the business, that used to be something that used to kind of irritate me, right? You do that, but no, it's not. No, you do that actually. Yeah. And if you don't, do something else.
I mean, you see this where people kind of rush through life trying to get to the part that the important part, they think. They rush through life and try to skip all these boring parts. They get to the end and they realize the part that they rushed through was life. Like, you can't just take the good only or look forward to the thing where you're going to finally be out of the service industry and free and blah, blah, blah. Because even like all the negative parts and all the parts you don't want to remember are parts of it. And trust me, when you get to the end and you look back, you're going to be like, I would have given anything at this point at the end of my life to have more of those bad parts and lots more of those bad parts than to see the end. Yeah.
I agree. And one of my boss one day said, I don't know if it's probably right. He said, how you do something is how you do everything.
Yeah, that's a good one.
So thinking that you're going to be, lazy in one part of your life and great in another part. No, it's like, as you said, it's life. It's life. It's just life.
Yeah. I'm disciplined and I save money and I'm very fiscally responsible, except for this like $10,000 crypto bet I made. No. It's an all or nothing. Do you find that people have more problems with fear, anger? What is the thing that people usually struggle with the most?
It's very wide because we have such different lives, so often it's anxiety, but strangely enough, I don't know if it's strange, but I would say in 75% of the people who come to see me, it doesn't matter if it's for anxiety, anger, or something like this, at the core of it is that they feel isolated. At the core of it is because they feel, And it doesn't matter if you have a family, a job, or friends, there is a thing of being isolated and not trust. I would say it's the loss of the trust and people around you have your back. Maybe you've been hurt too many times. Maybe you were in a situation where people didn't show up the way that you needed it. But you conceptualize as anxiety, anger, but very often it's an isolation problem. And they don't see it this way, right? They don't see it, but it's,
Yeah, that's it, because it's everything else, and it's just that things don't feel quite right. And, but deep down, I can't remember the name of the book, and I'm kicking myself, but it's one of the main books in IFS, Eternal Family Systems Therapy. Uh-huh. But it's talking about why most people come to therapy. And I will always remember this line. It said, pretty much everyone who comes to therapy because they're like looking to be loved and fear they might be unlovable. Like, even if they aren't willing to say that out loud, that's like the core of why people... And you go to the therapist and they're like, why'd you come? It's like, I just don't feel right. Or, it's like you always... And sometimes you don't even know it either. It's just like... I have this generalized malaise that I can't explain, even though things like when I write out the things that are true in my life, it looks good. It looks like what I want. But for some reason, I'm here talking to you and paying you money. So I don't know. It's like, so, yeah.
You're completely right. And most of the time, people don't know what's wrong, so to speak, right? Or they have in mind a reason why it might be wrong, but sometimes it's not the reality. We are followed. I often tell my clients, we're like a bunch of haunted houses, right? We have all those ghosts inside of us. And we sense they're there, but we cannot isolate them. We cannot see them per se. But we're all just a bunch of haunted houses. And when you sit with a therapist or somebody like me, it's like, okay, let's shine a light on one of those ghosts, right? Is it shame or guilt? Is it whatever? Let's resolve it. How is that impacting your life today?
My favorite descriptions along that line is Chris Williamson. He's talking about therapy, and he was telling a friend of his like why they should go to therapy, and he's like, you know what it's like? It's like you invite someone over to your house, and you're saying, this is my house, here's my kitchen, here's my living room, and you're showing them around, and then the therapist is like, well, what's that door? And you look over and you're like, oh, there's a door there. I don't know. And then like, okay, let's open that. And then you open that and it's like, there's a room here. And it's just the house you live in had a door that you didn't know about because you just passed by it and you'd never seen it. But all of a sudden, here it is. And okay.
You don't want to see it, or you don't want to see it, or you never saw it, period.
Someone listening at home who wanted to know a little bit more about you and how this whole process worked, where could they go to find out more?
The best is to go to emotionalhealthinstitute.org, and here you see the research, you see the work, the theory, you have testimonials, the programs, therapists, etc. So emotionalhealthinstitute.org or emres.com. It goes to the same place.
Awesome. And is this something that's like nationwide? Is it something that anyone throughout the world can do, or how does that work?
All over the world we are. The EHI, the Emotional Health Institute, is based in France, in the USA, and in Japan now for the last couple of years.
Okay, so you have enough time zones.
Yeah. We can do Asia, Europe, and France. We have people speaking from English to Swedish to Japanese to Filipino, Tagalog, I guess. I mean, there's people pretty much, and we all work on Zoom. I don't see people in person very rarely. Some people do, but most of us work on Zoom as well.
One of the few benefits, but true benefits of COVID, the whole world got comfortable with Zoom. So one of the nicer things.
And in my line of work, it's like sometimes people don't feel comfortable to meet somebody for the first time in an office they don't know. And for us to resolve the pattern, it's important for the brain and the body to feel safe. So I have a lot of clients who do a session through their car, because they don't want to do it at home, they don't want to meet me, they do the session in their car facing the ocean. It's completely fine. It doesn't matter. They have to feel safe where they are.
So I've never told this story on the air, but you said that in the car thing, and I had to throw this in. When I started this podcast, I was terrified of saying no to guests when it came to time, just because I was like desperate to get people to say yes, start off. I didn't know how it was all going to work. And so I said yes to a time I probably shouldn't have. And I had nowhere at work that I could do it. It was like right after I got off work. And so I'm just like in my car with my laptop that I was hoping would have the charge, using the Wi-Fi and like doing the first recording. And like when I go back, I can tell that the sound is different. And it's so funny. After that, I was like, why did I say yes? Like, what am I so afraid of? We would have just found another time. But like, yeah, it's
the thing that you do because you got to manage.
Yeah, you find a way to get through it. Before we end the call today, is there anything we didn't cover that you were hoping to talk about, or anything we missed?
No, I think it was a great conversation. What I would say is it doesn't matter how long people have been carrying an emotion. It doesn't matter if they know why they feel an emotion. There's always a potential to resolve an emotional difficulty. Like there's no curse of having to, even if you survive trauma, we cannot resolve the trauma that you had, that happened. But what can be resolved are the impacts that this trauma is creating in your life today. This can be completely resolved. It's also difficult to remove the value from the trauma, right? Something happened to me and so I'm attached to it because I suffered much. And that's a granted. But you don't have to suffer in your life today. That's not necessary. So it doesn't matter for how long you've been feeling it. It can be resolved.
Don't let the past win twice.
That's right.
It already had the bad event. We can accept it. We can do what we can do today, and that's about all we can do. So.
Correct. We can change it today, so today become the past of a better future.
Awesome. Well, thank you for spending a little bit of time coming on and talking to us. It serves you right.
Thank you. It was a pleasure. Thank you, Andrew.
Thank you for listening. That is today's episode. Now, if you have not taken a moment to check out our website, please do. It's servesyouRightPod.com. We have past episodes and all sorts of other things there. If you want to get in touch with me, that's the place to do it. I do appreciate that you've given me your most valuable asset, your time and attention. So thank you for listening, and stay tuned. We have some really cool guests coming up. I would hate it if you missed it. Cheers.